Hi there, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can change your Flutter launcher icon, and what I mean by that is if I should simply go out of this, and you would notice that every time you build your Flutter app, your application icon is always going to have the default Flutter logo. So we are going to see how we can change that. And to do that is quite simple. You just have to follow a simple step. So to start, we are going to use the Flutter Launcher Icons package, and you can find this at pub.dev. And it's a pretty simple instruction to follow. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and then grab this. So I'm just going to click on this to copy this. Then we can head back to VS Code. But before that, if you go ahead and read the documentation, if you do not want to use this in your pubspec.yaml file, you can create a new config file called flutter_launcher_icons.yaml. Now, I find it easier to just use the pubspec.yaml because then you don't need to create another file. And then these are just basic commands you would need to put into the YAML file. Okay, so we'll be going through this as soon as we install the package. So back in VS Code, we want to open up our pubspec.yaml, and I've cleaned up my pubspec.yaml, removing the comments. So you want to put this in your dev dependencies because your app doesn't depend on it to work. So with this application you see here, if I can open it again. So this was from one of my tutorials on how to create a BMI calculator, link in the description. And so this app needs this to run, even though I'm not using Cupertino icons. So if I were to use them, it would need them. But these are for the dev dependency. So as I develop some of the things that I need to have going on for me, so for example the lints, so those little corrections and underlines telling you constantly to use const, yeah, so that is coming from this. Now if I ignore using const and I decide to use, just go on with it, my app will still work, just that maybe performance may be bad. So back to that, I'm going to drop that right under Flutter lints. So I'm going to paste this in here, and then most often by default the pub.dev would run. If not, you can go ahead and just click on this icon right here, so you can see that is running already. So once that is done, you should check and make sure you have no problems. Okay, so now we have this installed. So the next step we can do is we can go ahead and read what we have to do. So back here, you notice after getting the dependency, so under dev dependencies, now we need to put in this flag. So we want to create Flutter icons, and then for Android, we're going to use the launcher icon. Now if you want to build this for iOS, you can also put in true, so that you don't have to regenerate or write the same code for iOS. Okay, now you can ignore this if you don't really care about iOS, but we'll leave it. And then the image part, so the icon you want to use for your launcher icon, you need to specify the path, and then this requires that your minimum SDK is 21. Okay, so we don't need to go ahead and type this ourselves again, so we can literally grab this line, so not there. So I'm going to start from the 21 and end right here. So copy this and then head back to VS Code, and in VS Code we want to still drop this under the dev dependencies. So I'm going to go right below this, give a space, and then drop this. Now if you put this within the same line, you're going to get an error. So you need to make sure that the Flutter icons is in the same line as the dev dependencies. So I'm going to place my icon here and simply move back one step, and that should fix the issue. Now the only other thing here is the image that we want to use, or the icon, isn't here. Okay, we don't have this, so we need to go ahead and then create this. So as you can see, after making this correction, it has updated and everything is okay. So the next step for me to do is go ahead and then create this path. Now you do not literally have to create this path. So what I mean is you don't have to literally use the same thing. You can create, let's say, image and then put in your icon and then change this to match that. But I'll stick to using this path. So make sure you are out of any folder, so you can literally go ahead and then close the lib folder or twirl it up back up. Make sure you're out, so I'm going to click out here, click on this to create a new folder, and then you call it assets. Make sure you spell that right. And then inside the assets, so right in here, I'm going to go ahead so you can right click on it and then create a new folder. So when I click on this, I'm going to call the new folder icon and then hit enter. So just as we see here, so assets, then slash. So inside we should find a folder called icon and then slash, and then we need to have our icon.png. So I have prepared an icon here. So I just designed this in Illustrator, and then it's just a horrible design, I know, but we can go ahead and use this, okay, as our icon. So I'm going to close this, and then I'm going to simply drag this icon into the icon folder right here, and then there it is. I don't need this showing up, so I can go ahead and close it. So essentially I have this assets folder and then this icon folder, and I have the icon.png right inside there. And you must make sure it's a PNG file which supports transparency, okay? And then it's called icon because it's called icon. So if this was called BMI, then this should change to BMI also. Okay, now that we have this set up, we can go back to our terminal, and if I head back to the browser and go back to the page here, you can see we need to run the package. Now this step here, we don't need this. Now this is necessary if you didn't create this in your pubspec.yaml and you created a different file where you would place this, then you need to specify where you can find that file. Now what we need to do is run the package since we didn't create this. So I can go ahead and then copy just this line because we had just finished running this pub.get. Now if you don't have this automatically running for you, then make sure you run this before you run that. So I'm going to copy this line, and then I'm going to head back to VS Code, and I'm going to paste this here and then hit enter. Now if you did everything right, this should take some seconds and then tell you everything is successful, blah blah blah. And then as you can see, we have that being successful. If I go back to my app here and then I go and check, nothing should have changed. As you can see, I have to rebuild this application for the changes to occur. So I'm going to stop this and then make sure I go back to my lib folder and then select my main.dat file and then hit and run this. If you want, you can delete this, but it isn't necessary. I have had some issues where in the past, if I had a file like this on a launcher like this and I needed to do something else, it would clash, so I would have to delete it. But in this case, it isn't necessary. So once this is done, I can go ahead and close this up, open this up, and you can see we have our icon right there. Okay, now something to note, if I go on and open this, there are some other attributes that we can set so you can read this and understand all of these. We've already used things like the image path, the minimum SDK for Android and stuff like that. Another thing I want to mention, which I wouldn't be doing, is that you can set adaptive icon backgrounds. Now this is useful for older smartphones or older versions of Android, if I would say, because then if you remember, we used to have very weird icons, squircles and other things. And then if you don't configure your app to have a transparent background, then it would look funny with some weird shapes. So you can see some of the icons here just have the icon on a white background. And you can see something here has a color. So we can use this to set that. And if you just wanted the color, then you can use the color property to change that. But if you wanted to use an image, then you have to add the assets to the image. And then you need the foreground color, which you can also use an icon or a color. Both are needed, stated by this line, or else it wouldn't work. So we don't need this because I think Android has evolved and that isn't necessary anymore. Now, one thing you will notice is we still have this Flutter underscore BMI, and this was the name that we gave to the project when we were creating this. To change that, you can head back to VS Code, and then sometimes I get lost in finding this. So we need to find our manifest file, which we can find under Android, and then we go to app, and then we go to source src, then the main file, and we have the Android manifest here. Opening this up, we just need to change this line. Okay, so I'm going to call this probably just BMI and leave it as it is. I am happy with this. You can give it whatever name you want to give to it. Then once this is done, you can see obviously it wouldn't change. I'm going to reload this. You notice it doesn't change. If I rebuild this, you notice it is not changing. So you guessed it, we need to stop this, and then we need to go ahead and rebuild this. So I'm going to select my main file so that I can have access to running this. So I'm going to run this without debugging as usual and wait for this to build. And you notice that this name is going to change to the name we set for the Android label right here. So now that this is downloading, if I close this up and then open, you can see we just have BMI, exactly what we put in here. Now, before I end this tutorial, I also want to mention that there are a lot of ways to create app icons, and I'll link this in the description. So there's this app icon generator, which you can come in and drop in whatever image you have designed. And it's always good you have it in what? A PNG file to support transparency. So you can use an app icon. So you can use this. I don't use this basically. What I normally do is have image sets. So I can place in the image I design and then check what I wanted to build for. So if I'm not building this for iOS, I can uncheck that and then I can make sure it will build this. Now this will generate different sizes, so depending on the screen. But using this package, you can literally use any size and to scale it up. I always prefer to use the largest app size, sorry. So if you look at this, I got this back and it has different sizes. So I simply use the largest one and then the package will go ahead and scale this up for you. Another one you can use is here, which is icon.kitchen and a whole bunch of, should I call it gibberish. Now this is in dark mode because I have terrible eyes, so this really hurts. So I like this because you get a preview of what your icon will look like. So if you don't have any image or anything designed, you can use any of these icons, and as you change them, you can see the app changes. You can play with the background, pick whatever color you want, and you see that that also changes. If you have a text you want to use rather as a name, you can simply type it here. So let's say logo, and that says logo over there, and you can play around. If you want to use an image, then simply load in your image. So you can see I have my image here and I can see how that will look like. When I'm done, if I use a background here, that will simply mean that my icon will have a blue background like you see with some of the apps here. Okay, and when I'm done, you simply hit download to download this, extract it, and then put it in your assets and then go on with the process. Okay, I would link all of these in the description so that you can have access to them and play around with them. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Stay safe.